Hey everyone, we are back in the Bay. This is Gateway Open Office Hours. Thank you for joining us. I'm here, as always, with my co-founder, Carter Laren. And yeah, it's good to be back. We had a busy week last week, chock full of events with, first starting with ICBC. We last recorded when we were in Vancouver.
That was just last week?
That was just last night, I think,
okay.
right? I didn't lose a week, right?
No, I think you're right. Yeah. Okay.
And then there was New West Summit, which you flew down the next morning and participated in that big event. I saw a lot of mainstream news. That was great.
I was really impressed with New West Summit, actually, just to shout out to them. They
Job, Jim.
Yeah, really good conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And really good Vancouver conference, but we already talked about that one. So.
We did. Yeah. So, yeah. What'd you see at New West Summit? How was...
Honestly,
Am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, because I literally got in there, did my panel, and left. What I saw was people I hadn't seen in a while that I got to chat with him really quickly.
Yeah, it was kind of like the unofficial, because the conference was a month early. It's like the unofficial kind of 1 year anniversary for Gateway.
Yeah. No, it was good. There was a lot of interesting companies. A lot of the right, I don't say the right people, but like a lot of the right people for our business. Like there's a lot of investors and founders and that kind of stuff. I had a long talk with Troy Dayton, who I haven't talked to in a while.
Troy Dayton of the famous ArcView Group.
Not infamous. That's it's famous. And I found out that he lives a stone's throw away from my house, literally. I think so.
Stone's throw, not a stoner's throw.
Stoner's throw is slightly shorter. But yes.
I think Sabo would argue that point.
Well, Sabo is a different kind of stoner. Sabo is a badass. So,
that's right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was good. We, some good conversations, but I wasn't there for too long. But I will say the event was it looked really good from what I could see. Mm-hmm. And lots of companies, lots of people, lots of interest. So.
Yeah, and more exciting events to look forward to in the next coming months. Next year, Las Vegas is next month, a few weeks away now.
Yeah.
Whether we'll be able to chisel out time to go there, I'm not sure.
I don't know. We wanted to do a free pitch practice for people at Vegas, but all the booths are sold out, so we should have thought of that earlier.
And then it looks like some South by Southwest news is coming down the pipeline, although...
Were we allowed to say anything?
I don't know. We may or may not be at South by Southwest this year. Stay tuned for details.
That was like the worst secret hiding ever. So there's that, which is great.
And you've been busy. I've seen articles being released from you.
Apparently there's one in Entrepreneur Magazine today, but I haven't, I clicked on the URL and it wasn't working, but people were tweeting about it, so I don't know.
It's been redacted.
Yeah. I don't know why. It was less controversial than the one that was in Huffington Post.
Yeah, the Huffington Post one, I clenched up a little bit. It was like, oh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Speaking the truth, often sometimes scary.
Yeah, I mean, look, what
was it titled? It was.
I didn't. The title that I wanted was "I'm with Herb," H-E-R-B, but they didn't go for it.
I've actually seen pins like that floating around.
I'm with Herb.
Yeah.
Oh well, I wanted to do like the little HRC logo, but with "I'm with Herb." It also would have been a misleading title because the controversial conclusion of the article was that Hillary was a bigger negative risk to cannabis than Trump. But hey, it's one issue. Yeah. Truth matters. It's just one issue, guys.
Check it out. It's on Huffington Post.
Just,
Carter Laren being controversial as always.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, like spending the time to write those articles. It's like we talk about this a lot. Like, how much time should we chisel aside to kind of be doing this kind of outreach? And I think, as we start to, speak more and be in the news more and get these articles, startups come and ask us, like, how do I do that? And it's kind of like a very broad and open-ended question. Let's start with the articles, because it's probably the easiest topic, and a lot of people actually just don't know that to become a contributor is actually not that difficult. You just have to
not too hard. No.
Become good at pitching yourself in that kind of thought leader right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I want to step back and have like a broader comment first, if that's okay.
Of course.
Because I was
it's your show.
I was thinking about this the other day. Why is it my show? I was thinking about this the other day. I sometimes feel like we say, do what we say, not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's a lot of things that I wish we were doing better at Gateway.
If we had more time.
Yeah.
I think it would be
and
possible.
so I realized maybe it's good to clarify that, often what we talk about is the ideal way, a very idealistic way of like, these are all the things you should do as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is a lot messier, which like some of those things don't get done the way they should. And like, just be okay with that because, you're not going to get all the things done exactly the right way. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware of what your goal is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the preface to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because what I'm about to describe, we didn't do a great job of, frankly. So a lot of people think that they can get press. A lot of founders feel like the launching of their company is newsworthy, and it's not. And a lot of people at the last minute are like, oh, I'm gonna, we need press next week, and that's not how it works.
Sure.
In terms of getting someone else to write about you, that takes usually you have to do something actually monumental, which if you're a startup, you're not really doing anything. I mean, let's be honest. You're planning to do something big at some point, but you're not doing anything worth paying attention to, and at least worth writing about, right? So that means that in and of itself isn't a story, which means you need to ingratiate yourself to reporters. And they need to kind of know who you are. And then, there's a lot of stories that are kind of like mildly interesting, but they're more about the backstory and the person and why it's interesting and why it could be interesting. But those are a dime a dozen. And so to get yours to be the one that's covered requires basically a personal relationship with reporters. And it doesn't mean you have to be best buddies, but it means they have to kind of know who you are and have a rapport with you and trust your expertise. Yep. And so, one great thing to do, I actually learned this from, I guess we did it a little bit at, Cryptography Research, although it wasn't really me, it was more Paul, because he was the crypto genius more than I was. But, he would build relationships with reporters by just providing information to them. Sending them stuff unrelated to our company, but just like, hey, this was interesting. You should pay attention to this or whatever. And so he ended up building relationships with a reporter at New York Times and eventually the Wall Street Journal. I ended up building that relationship with the Wall Street Journal reporter later, and then they would start coming to us for questions, right? So the Wall Street Journal reporter would call me up and be like, "Hey, I heard this rumor about Blu-ray or this thing or whatever. Can you do you have comments about it?" Yeah. Right? And so because I was in that space and he knew he could trust me and I would give him some information, and so that makes it easy for them to write about you later when there's something that you want them to write about.
Sure.
And the person who really drilled this home for me was Aaron Patzer, who founded Mint.com. And Aaron really talked about he spent a lot of time, I don't know if you remember when Mint first started. I think it was like right when TechCrunch was, it wasn't called Disrupt, it was called TC40 or something, TechCrunch 40. I think he won like the second year they had it or something. But he, before that, he was getting a lot of press. And he had a lot of people writing about him. And he told me that what he had done was really, again, he made it part of his routine. I don't know if it was daily, but it was definitely weekly, if not daily. He made it part of his routine to send helpful information to reporters. And what you have to understand is reporters are always under a deadline. They, like everyone else, they want to do as little work as possible to get their job done. Sure. And so if you do stuff for them, they love you. And so if you start like, here's my thoughts on blank, and they can just like basically steal it and publish it with some other of their stuff, right? Or here's some info, or here's this, or here's that. I noticed, and you have to know what they write about and what they're interested in. So it takes time, and he spent time kind of paying attention to that and being a resource for them. And when Mint came closer to launching, and then launched and started getting some traction, he was kind of their go-to guy, and he was he ended up being on major news networks and interviewed, and I think he was on the cover of, maybe he wasn't on the cover, but I think he was on like Fast Company or something like that. Like, he had those people reaching out to him, but it wasn't because they just found him randomly. It was because he spent time laying the groundwork and building those relationships. I know that was a really, really long
No,
answer.
I mean, it's great. It brings up an interesting point, because the whole thought process behind it is a little bit contrived, right? It's like, I want this, so I'm going to have to do all this to get there.
Yeah. It feels manipulative, kind of.
But you need to like change your mindset and like, okay, yes, this is a means to an end, but I'm actually going to try to build a relationship with these people and enjoy them. And like, if I don't like them as a person, then maybe I won't try to build that relationship. But it's like the most successful kind of PR, or journalist relationships, it's like they actually become kind of friends, and you enjoy giving them information and seeing them kind of build their personal brand alongside like the building of your company.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you don't want to look at it as a friendship, even you can just look at it as a mutually beneficial business relationship, which is like, look, there's they get it, right? They know what the relationship's about, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay. You're not manipulating them. They're very well aware of what's going on, and they like it because they're happy to choose you to write about in exchange for help.
Sure.
Right? It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
So you're not being manipulative or anything. I mean, you are if, you secretly hate the person or I don't know, you're not actually trying to help them. You need to genuinely figure out like, oh, how can I help them and be a resource? And I think that's just part of our, you and I have talked about this a lot. This is part of our general philosophy in the startup community generally. Be a resource. I don't believe in karma actually existentially, but I like the idea and I like the mindset of look, it'll come back to you, right?
Sure.
Make yourself a resource, help people out, and eventually that'll come back to you. And because it often does.
Okay.
Right.
So let's dig into kind of you've gone through the process, you've built the relationships, you're getting yourself out there, the motivation behind it. So becoming a quote unquote thought leader, like it's a phrase that's thrown around a lot, and like to actually achieve that and be a resource, like why is it important? It's like there's the very obvious things. It's like, oh, it gets me press, right? But it's like, how's that actually going to help your startup as well? Like going deeper and being the master of your domain and whatnot.
Well, I mean, it not only gets you press, it gets you speaking engagements. It can get you inbound clients, right? I mean, I think someone that did a decent job for a while, although I think he slacked off recently, is Pranav at Trellis.
Get to work, Pranav.
He has many fine qualities.
I think he's had the flu for the last couple of days, so
yeah.
I'll give him a pass.
Yeah. But, he was writing articles very, very regularly, and he ended up getting speaking engagements as a result. And he also had potential clients read them, and he wasn't writing articles about Trellis is great, this is what you should use for your inventory management. He was just writing about inventory management generally, or regulations, or whatever it was, and the little bio thing at the bottom is like, oh, he's the CEO and founder of Trellis, inventory management. And so, people would read the article and then like what he had to say or think that he was smart or interesting, and that would, and then they would notice, oh, I've never heard of Trellis. Let me go look that up, and that would lead to a sale. So that kind of thing happens.
So the interesting thing about that is actually just very tactically, always try to get a bio put into an article that you have spent some time on. If you can get one in an interview, that's even better. But be tactical with that actual blurb. Like have it address the audience that you're trying to speak to. Include a link to, like, maybe it's a special landing page that is intended for the readers of that article. I mean, just there's a lot that you can do with that little blurb, because people always look at it if they're interested in the article. But going back to what you were saying about like the benefits of putting yourself out there and becoming that thought leader, when it does come time for you to do fundraising, not only does it give you like a strong reputation to hang your hat on, but that's how a lot of investors find their deal flow, right? They're perusing these different news outlets and articles and
Sometimes,
looking
yeah.
for hot companies or thought leaders, and we'll reach out.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes. Or it's just even validation, right? If they Google you and they see, oh, this person is
Yeah.
in the space. And I hate the term thought leader, honestly.
I do too.
But
That's why I keep
I think
using air quotes.
right. So I think if it was an actual definition, the actual definition is more like guy who kind of knows the space and communicates well,
Yeah.
right? Or gal, right?
Do not put thought leader in your headline
your
of your
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn,
Yeah.
for God's sake.
Yeah. but so you don't have to be. You do have to be an expert. You don't have to be the world-renowned expert. That would be better, right? But you do have to really understand the space and have something to communicate. And I think a lot of times, I mean, we've noticed this with founders, the ability to communicate clearly and persuasively and effectively in writing is super, super important. And I think it's something that, frankly, we undervalue. I mean, I know with cohort 2, we're going to try and place more of an emphasis on it, because it doesn't matter how great your product is, when you communicate over email in an unintelligible way, or you misspell things, or your thought pattern isn't clear, or it's you're overly emotional or whatever. If it's not well written and cogent, it can really burn you with customers, with partners, with investors. We've gotten emails from investors complaining about founders' communication style before.
Yeah, it's an interesting role to be in.
Yeah, and I think it's something that people undervalue, and to a large extent, I don't know if this is true or not, but people judge how you communicate, at least in a written fashion, but probably also to some extent a verbal fashion. They judge how your brain. They use that as an example of how your brain works, right? So they assume that if this is how you communicate, then that's how you're thinking, and that's how your brain works. And again, I don't know if that's accurate completely, but that's the assumption. Yeah. And so if you come across as a scatterbrain in your writing, then they'll assume that you're scatterbrained.
And we've worked with a lot of people actually like that, and it seems to be more common these days than it maybe had a decade ago.
I mean, a separate show is the education system in the country, right? I mean,
sure,
it's anti-education. Yes. You learn less. You actually forget things that you knew by going through college lately. It seems like.
Ooh.
So
that does sound like an interesting episode.
Yeah, it's like they teach you how to
for a different show, maybe
how to unthink. Like I don't know what.
Wow. Okay, well, we're gonna get in trouble now.
No, it's horrible. College is horrible. I don't mind saying that.
Which is how we actually.
And shout out to 1517 and Danielle for we're not the only ones in Silicon Valley who think that. So
that is true.
At least I won't put words in your mouth.
No, it's fine. I mean, one day we will tell our origin story, and that has a lot to do with how we ended up here.
Yeah, but circling back to what we were talking about, a lot of people, you would expect a college graduate to be able to write in a coherent manner, and that's just not true anymore. Even if maybe some of them are even smart, they just can't formulate sentences. Then no one's taught them how to write in.
And maybe it's not can't. Maybe it's just opt not to.
Right. It could be laziness. It could be that they don't understand the importance of it. And I know, maybe I'm an old guy, and I know that maybe a lot of people just communicate via emoji now, but you can't get investment via emoji, and you can't get customers via emoji very easily.
I'm a unicorn.
Right. Exactly.
That works.
Yeah. Give me the other side. So yeah, I think it is an undervalued skill, and you need to develop it. Because as a founder, you need to develop it because you're a storyteller. As a founder, you're telling the story of your company to everyone all the time, and you don't have to be, J.K. Rowling, but you do have to be good.
Right. So there's I don't know. Maybe it's all the short form reading and writing that we've kind of gravitated towards as of late, but. Short of taking like a professional writing class, technical writing class, all those things, which are great. I mean, they have day-long seminars, which probably could get you tuned up pretty fast. but just reading more, like long form reading, right?
Yeah. Reading more is great, especially reading nonfiction. Fiction is great as well. It's great for your imagination and vocabulary and everything else. But reading nonfiction, you can see how other people communicate an idea clearly, and
that's all I read is
that'll rub off on you.
Yeah,
I hope. So
interesting.
Yeah, I don't think this is novel. I think people know reading makes you a better writer. Good writers read a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's not something to be taken lightly as a founder.
Okay.
So yeah, I feel like we've beaten that horse.
Sure. So
we've beaten that unicorn.
Yeah.
Dead.
So we've gotten a lot of requests for kind of like tactical things, and I try to intersperse it in the conversation. But since we've been talking about getting press and getting articles and stuff, let's just do a hypothetical and kind of like walk through the process that we would recommend people doing.
Okay.
You are a young startup looking to launch. Hopefully not 2 weeks from launch, maybe about a month from launch.
A month? Okay. Here we go.
I mean, people, come on. There's just not enough foresight.
Step one, build a time machine.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, tactically, what would someone do in order to start like becoming interesting to reporters? And I'll go ahead and seed it with the very beginning, just like, I'm a big spreadsheet type of person. Start listing the type of publications that you'd like to be inserted into.
Mm-hmm.
Find the people that are writing on the industry or the type of founder you are. Like, find an angle, right? There's unique angles that people can use. It just, like, if you have a cannabis startup, it doesn't have to be necessarily a cannabis writer. Like, maybe it's your prior history. Maybe you're a female founder. Like, what have you seen people do creatively as far as the types of publications they're being put into?
That's a good question. Usually you're not just a cannabis startup. You're a cannabis and something startup, like cannabis AI startup, or a cannabis, we talked about Trellis and inventory management startup. So people that write about AI or inventory management or whatever may be interested because cannabis is a hot new thing. And so, going after those people, having a unique view. People like controversial perspectives and they like unique views. So if you're saying the same thing that everyone is saying and you're like, it's a green rush and blah, 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 it's like, yeah, we've written about that before, right? But if you say something, and I'm not saying this is true, right? But if you say something that's like, actually, this one thing everyone thinks is good is bad, and here's why, like that becomes interesting to people, right? So I think that's a good way to go about it. And you have, I don't know. I kind of want to hear from you. Like, how do you go after reporters? Do you tweet at them? Do you, in that spreadsheet of yours, do you put like, I assume you read their article, figure out like what their perspective is. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's getting that initial contact with them is important, and a lot of journalists are using Twitter to kind of like put themselves out there, build their following. If you're engaging with them, liking their stories, asking them questions, it shows that you're interested. If you even get that initial hook, have an opportunity, like maybe like hop on a call or something with them, and then just very quickly ask them about what they're interested in writing and how you can help, and like, are there any interesting stories that they're working on, and if you have unique angles, starting to just like insert yourselves. And after you build that relationship, it's easier to kind of like progress.
Do you comment on their stories? Do you
Sure.
like provide?
Yeah. You can go, you can go on to where the article is posted, and there's always a comment section, using Twitter or Facebook, whatever. But generally, it's just, you're trying to get to that point where you're really, it's just like any other client services type of thing. You're trying to understand what their needs are, what's going to make them successful, and like enabling that. And if you are an interesting startup that like fits into like the story that they're trying to write, or you provide a unique perspective or a controversial story, that is newsworthy in their eyes, right?
Right.
It's not. It's very much like building a product. It's like, it's not what's interesting to you as a founder. It's what's interesting to your audience.
Right. Which translates into what's going to get their editor excited and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. yeah, and like taking it a step further, and then like once you've built that relationship, using it to kind of like leverage your way around the publication. So it's like, how do you become a content provider yourself, like in that magazine, and what's the value of that versus doing it in your own blog? So obviously, something like Huffington Post or Entrepreneur Mag is going to have a lot more exposure than simply posting your own blog. So it is good to have content on your own blog. You might even be able to repost the article if you get the agreement from them, but just saying, hey, I wrote this really interesting story. Or maybe you didn't even write it. Maybe it's an abstract with some bullet points, and you send it to them and be like, hey, do you think this is something your editor would find interesting?
Yeah. I like writing on your own blog. I like LinkedIn as a way to publish your stuff.
You've done some on Medium as well.
You know what? I was told Medium's great. Be on Medium. Frankly, it's been useless so far. But whatever.
Okay.
I mean, I know everyone uses Medium, but if you don't already have an audience on Medium, it's like,
sure,
it falls into this black hole, and
it's,
no one
it's
sees
largely tied to your Twitter following, right?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know, but like my LinkedIn gets way more views, right?
Yeah.
And so, I like, before you're getting published somewhere else, I think it's good to be writing on your own blog and publishing it in these other places, because it's something that they can go look to see what kind of writer are you, right? And what have you said in the past? And they'll do a little bit of due diligence on you. The other thing is, each reporter is different. So I was talking to Sarah, our PR person, about this a couple weeks ago, and some reporters like to be pitched a story, right? And they like to have that. Here's the abstract. Here's the outline. He's going to write about. I think she was pitching. I don't know what she was pitching for me, but whatever.
The legality of
something. She was pitching
Cannabis
some article that
articles
I recently wrote for someone, and she pitched it to. She pitched it to one reporter, and their response was, "I don't like being pitched stories. Like, don't tell me what. Like, I don't like being pitched stories." Or one editor. I'm like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I write the stories.
Right,
I determine what.
I determine what gets. Yeah. I'm like,
Very
okay, fine. Right. But other people are like, oh, thank you. That's exactly what I want. I want this. So you just have to learn what each person wants, because everyone's different, and some people don't like being pitched an angle.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But some people do, and you can ask them. You can be. It didn't burn the bridge that she had pitched someone. She pitched them. They said, I don't want this. She said, oh, no, thanks. Now that I know, I'll send you what you want. And I'm like, okay, great. It doesn't. So
interesting.
It's good to kind of be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you start getting to know journalists better, and you actually meet them in person and realize that they're just a person. It's very much like when you get to see behind the veil of like, venture capital and stuff. It's just like, oh, they're just people with a job.
Right.
And you just need to find out what makes them tick.
Right. And nowadays journalists are nowadays journalists, they're under deadlines, but the deadlines I think are, oddly enough, I think the deadlines are tighter than when we just had a printing press. Because when those are like, things go to press at a certain time, but kind of, all the newspapers kind of went to press at a similar time, and they came out, that next morning super early or whatever. Yeah. And now so you couldn't really beat some, like 5 minutes or an hour difference. Like, you're not beating someone to the story, right? You kind of like, there's this kind of time when everything gets published, and there's some slop. Now it's like, oh, we want this before everyone else, and everything's published right away. And so there's this pressure to just like get it out quickly. And actually, something that I hate that publications do is changing stories to correct them without saying that on their website. They do it all the time. I think it's despicable journalism, but it's done all the time, right? Where they like they'll edit something without saying this was a correction.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I changed this to this.
Right.
I used to say this, and now I said this because I was wrong and I fucked up and I published my story too quickly without doing research. Right. But that happens all the time on the internet. And so there's almost this lean startup publishing thing that happens now, which is like, get something out as fast as you can and edit it.
Yeah. Which we've seen the consequences of.
Right. But what you have to understand from their perspective is, writers don't get paid as much as they used to. So they're struggling to crank out content at a much higher volume than they have been in the past, right? And so it's hard to do. I mean, I can criticize them all day long, right? But it's hard to do what I'm asking them to do, because it's time consuming,
Yeah.
and they've got deadlines, and they're struggling to crank out high volume because they're not getting paid much for each thing.
Yeah.
And now there's this kind of clickbait component to it, so that they can't just report on something that's interesting. It has to be sensational in some way.
Yeah.
And so they're under a lot of pressure to do all this stuff, and anything you can do to help make their job easier, they will appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a pretty prominent journalist the other night, and he was telling me that the other week he published 6 articles in a single day.
It's crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we have other stuff going on, but for me to get an article out every other week is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's crazy, right? And I don't think it used to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so interesting. We'll wrap it up with a little talk about the PR person, right?
Okay.
Because you mentioned Sarah. We didn't hire Sarah in the beginning. We did a lot of legwork ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah came in when we reached a certain point where we felt it would be helpful to have her, where we could focus on other things. But what do you think that point is for most startups? And like, when is the right time to hire a PR person?
Man, I feel like you're putting me on the spot because I like Sarah. I like what Sarah's done for it. I really like Sarah, and we're going to continue to use Sarah because she's been doing a great job.
Oh, good. I'll sign the contract then.
Yes. No, seriously.
Sorry, Sarah. I owe you a contract, and I'm...
Yeah, she's been doing a great job. That said, in general, I hate hiring external PR people.
Yeah.
I have, in the past, been burned by spending... I mean, I remember we paid someone once like $10K a month, and it was like ridiculous. It was ridiculous. They did nothing. It's, they spend very little. They all talk a big talk about getting you in publications or doing this or knowing people, but it's very rarely worth it. So I think you can bootstrap on this for a long time, and then I think you just need to be kind of shop around for people who are going to be economical and then hold their feet to the fire on, like, okay, what is the time frame and what am I going to get out of it? Mm-hmm. And they might say to you, look, it's going to take 3 months to even start getting anything.
Yeah.
Be aware of that, right? Okay, then what's going to happen? Well, then this will happen, and then we might do this, and blah, blah, blah. And you kind of have to hold their feet to the fire, and you have to check in periodically to make sure you feel like you're getting value for what you're doing. And, just to expose our internal, workings a little bit. Like, we had that conversation when Sarah's beginning contract was up, right? We're like, okay, we did a few months with her first, and like, was it worth it? And we kind of looked back and said, okay, well, we did this, but not that, and we really want to do that. And so then we had a conversation with her about going forward, and okay, well, what can we expect? And there was that initial hump of takes a while to like get everyone kind of knowing who you are and build the relationships. And now, this week I had an article in Huffington Post and an article in Entrepreneur magazine. Yeah,
that's one
which
thing
wouldn't have happened probably without Sarah.
Well,
right. So
beyond getting into those publications, the great thing that she's done is kind of be like, oh, here are some topics that people are finding interesting.
Yeah,
can you write on this?
Exactly.
And it's like forcing us to like, oh yeah, we should actually. That's a good opportunity. We should sit down and write.
Right. It tells us what they want to hear too. Like, oh, do you have a perspective on this thing? It's like, actually, I do. Yeah.
Because when you're going on your day-to-day business, it is honestly hard to set aside that time to just like sit down and write and like understand that there is a lot of value there. So when it comes to that amount of time and like the cadence that you create for yourself, because entrepreneurs are great kind of having a repeating schedule. What do you recommend? Is it once a week that you would like to get a writing done?
Yeah, so my goal is an article a week, and I generally think you have to carve out, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I used to write a lot. I used to be the editor of an online magazine. I think it's true for most writers that I know. They need absolute no interruption. Some of them need silence, some of them need music, it doesn't matter, but like they need no interruptions for a large block of time.
Like 4 hours?
Yeah, like a big block of time. Yeah. And like 4 hours. Like I like to carve out like a morning. Just be like, okay.
Just wake up.
I'm not even gonna check email. This is all I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people because people like, we're in this ADD culture of having to always check everything, but it's like coding, right? So for the software engineers out there, they've done studies, and if you get interrupted, so your brain goes into this flow state,
Yep.
right? And if you get your flow state interrupted, it takes like 15 to 20 minutes to get back to your starting point if it's a
Wow.
complex flow,
Wow.
right? So it's horrible. If you get interrupted every 10 minutes, you get nothing done, literally. You're like always getting back into flow.
Right.
And writing, I think, is very similar. So getting interrupted, I mean, it happened actually the other day when I was working on one of these articles. Like, we were working here, and founders were coming in asking questions, and I would literally, I would read a paragraph. I was trying to think about what I wanted to write and how I wanted to change and what was coming next, and I would read a paragraph and just get to the point where, like, okay, so maybe, and then someone would interrupt me, and I would have a 30-second conversation, and I would have to go all the way back to the beginning of that paragraph and start reading it again because I lost my flow.
Yeah.
And like that's devastating.
Speaking of completely new episodes, I think, compartmentalizing and batch processing and all that, like getting shit done, mentality,
Right.
I think would make a great episode.
Yeah, it would
We
be.
can
It would
just
be good.
bring some people on and talk about what their tips and tricks are.
Absolutely.
I'm always trying to game it just because it seems like we have way too much going on constantly.
Yeah. But in terms of writing, I would say, like, I like the once a week thing, and I like carving out time, and I think that's the way to do it. And you basically just need to tell other people, I am not available for these, like, unless the building is on fire, leave me alone.
Right.
Right. And you gotta have the discipline to do it.
Yeah.
Which I don't always have, but that's my goal.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So this has been largely PR and press, writing, master of your domain, thought leader focused. If you have any questions regarding the topic, please send it in. Email is ask@gtwy.co. You can also use the hashtag GatewayOH. We'll be here again next week answering your questions, hopefully.
We have a new, I don't know if it's a director or a producer.
We do. Oh, yes.
Michael Finkbeiner is...
He's in the office.
He's behind that wall right over there.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
Camera angles. Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
And he peeked out at one point. I thought maybe like I had a booger on my face or something. I don't know what he was trying to show me, but yeah, I guess everything's okay because he went back. But yeah, thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
And he's helping us with camera angles. And I'm noticing. I know I'm not supposed to look at my phone on air,
It's
but
okay.
he's tweeting while he's doing that. So he's like
multitasking.
Michael, thank you. Or is it Mike today? Sorry, it's Mike. Today he's Mike.
Mike.
Yes.
Mike. So. Next week, same bat time, same bat place. Yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll see you then.
Alrighty.
All right.